He did everything he was told a real man should do. He was tough, self-reliant, and never showed a hint of weakness. He built his life on a foundation of emotional silence, but that same foundation was crumbling beneath him, pushing him to a breaking point he never saw coming. This is the story of how the habit he was so proud of, the habit of bottling it all up, almost cost him everything. What if the single greatest lie we've been told as men isn't about money or success? What if it's a lie about our own nature? A lie that tells us that to be strong, we must be silent. For generations, this code has been passed down, father to son, a legacy of emotional armor. We're taught to carry our burdens without complaint, to swallow our pain, and to present a mask of unbreakable calm. But the weight of this silence is a heavy one, and it's creating a crisis that unfolds not in public view, but in the quiet, desperate moments when a man is utterly alone. This isn't just one man's story. It is the story of millions of men performing a version of masculinity that is draining their life force, wrecking their relationships, and leading them down a path of isolation and despair. It's a story about a manly habit that has become a silent killer. But more importantly, it's about how to break free. The code of silence. Building the wall. Let's call him John. John's story isn't unique. In fact, its power is in how familiar it is. From a young age, the lessons were clear. When he fell and scraped his knee, he was told to brush it off and stop crying. When he was scared of the dark, big boys aren't afraid. When a friend's comment stung, he was taught to clench his jaw and man up. Each moment was a brick, and with each brick, a wall was built around his heart. This isn't about blaming our parents or society. It's about understanding a pattern of conditioning so deeply ingrained it feels like second nature. Social and cultural norms have long encouraged men to hide or minimize their feelings, especially sadness and fear. This is the code of silence, passed down through generations, an unwritten rulebook for being a man. The central rule? Emotional suppression. The belief that showing what you truly feel is a sign of weakness. John became an expert at building his own emotional prison. He excelled in sports, not just because he was athletic, but because the field was one of the few places aggression was celebrated. He chased a demanding career, not for the money, but because the long hours were a perfect distraction from the growing emptiness inside. On the outside, he was a success story, self-reliant, decisive, and unflappable. He wore what many call the mask of masculinity, a carefully built facade of control. And it worked for a while. People respected him. They saw him as a rock. But nobody saw the incredible energy it took to maintain that mask. No one knew the toll of constantly policing his own thoughts, of pushing down the natural human experiences of doubt and sadness. Adherence to these traditional masculine norms, like emotional restriction, is a major driver of this kind of suppression. He was living under the tyranny of what a man should be, totally disconnected from the man he was. This habit is so dangerous because it masquerades as a virtue. We call it being tough, or having a stiff upper lip. Some even mistakenly call it stoicism. But there's a world of difference between true stoic resilience, which is about acknowledging your emotions and responding with reason, and suppression, which is just pretending those emotions don't exist. One is about mastering your emotions. The other is about being mastered by them. One is a sign of true strength. The other is a ticking time bomb. The silent crisis. When the foundation crumbles. For years, John's life looked perfect. Good job, loving partner, friends who looked up to him. But internally, a collapse was underway. The habit of emotional suppression wasn't a quirk. It was an active poison, seeping into every corner of his life. It started with a low-grade hum of anxiety he couldn't shake. Then came the irritability. Small frustrations at work would trigger huge anger. He'd snap at his partner over nothing, then retreat into a stony silence, unable to explain or apologize because he didn't even understand the rage himself. He just felt numb. He was emotionally disconnected, a spectator in his own life. His relationships began to fray. His partner, who once saw him as a rock, now saw a fortress. "I can't get in," she would say. "It's like you're a million miles away." She was right. Intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability was the one thing John's entire identity was built to prevent. So he shared nothing, and in that silence, connection died. His friendships were the same. They were built on shared activities, watching sports, grabbing a drink, talking about work, but never on shared struggles. The unspoken rule was that everyone was fine. To admit otherwise would break the code. This is the tragic irony for so many men, surrounded by people, but utterly alone. This sense of isolation is a critical problem, with one 2023 study finding a majority of young men agree with the statement, "No one really knows me well." This is the silent crisis. It's the high-functioning depression that goes undiagnosed because it looks like anger and numbness instead of tears. It's the crippling anxiety that's masked by overworking. It's the profound loneliness that festers even in a crowded room. And the stakes are lethally high. The statistics are a brutal wake-up call. Across the globe, men die by suicide at more than double the rate of women. In the United States, men account for nearly 80% of all suicide deaths. What's the connection? This code of silence is a huge part of it. Men who strongly conform to traditional masculine norms, like emotional restriction and aggressive self-reliance, are more than twice as likely to die by suicide. They're conditioned to believe that asking for help is a failure to man up, a belief that is not just outdated, it's lethal. For John, the breaking point wasn't one big event. It was the day he woke up and the numbness had given way to a terrifying void. The mask had become so heavy he could no longer hold it up. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. He felt no joy, no sadness, no anger, just overwhelming exhaustion. The foundation he had so carefully built hadn't just cracked, it had turned to dust. He was in free fall, and for the first time, he was terrified. The habit that was supposed to make him strong had left him completely, utterly broken. The turning point, a glimmer of hope. Rock bottom has a strange clarity. When you've lost everything, there's nothing left to pretend. For John, the breaking point came on a quiet Tuesday morning. His partner had left a note on the kitchen counter. It didn't say, "I'm leaving you." It said, "I can't watch you disappear anymore. I love you, but I can't live with a ghost. Please, get help." Every defense mechanism John had built over a lifetime screamed at him to crumple the note, to get angry, to dismiss her as being dramatic. That was the old programming. But the exhaustion was too deep. The void was too real. The pain of staying the same had finally become greater than the fear of changing. He sat at the kitchen table for an hour, just holding the note. He thought about his life, a series of hollow achievements and distant relationships. He was winning a game he didn't even want to play, and he realized that the strength he was so proud of was a lie. It was a brittle shield that had kept him from ever truly living. The first step was the hardest thing he'd ever done. It wasn't a tough workout or a business negotiation. It was picking up his phone to make an appointment with a therapist. His hand trembled, his mind flooded with a lifetime of conditioning. "This is weak. You're pathetic. You should be able to handle this yourself." But a new, quieter voice was starting to emerge, a voice that whispered, "What if this is the strongest thing you've ever done?" He made the call. It was a single, terrifying act of surrender. He was surrendering the illusion of control, the mask he'd worn for decades, and the belief that he had to do it all alone. In that moment of surrender, he found the first glimmer of hope. He didn't know what was next, but for the first time, he was willing to find out. If this story is resonating with you, if you see yourself in John's struggle, know that you are not alone. And if you believe this is a conversation more men need to have, consider sharing this with someone who might need to hear it. Because that first step, that first crack in the wall of silence, is not the end. It's the beginning. Dismantling the wall. The power of vulnerability. John's first therapy session was awkward. He sat across from a stranger, arms crossed, giving one-word answers. The habit of a lifetime, the instinct to hide, was fighting hard. He spent 20 minutes talking about anything but the gaping hole in his life. The therapist was patient. He didn't push. He just created a space where for the first time there was no expectation for John to be strong or in control. A space to just be. And in that safety, the first few bricks of the wall started to loosen. The word the therapist used was vulnerability. John hated it. To him, vulnerability meant weakness and danger. But he slowly began to understand that he had been wrong. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the courage to be seen when you can't control the outcome. It's saying, I'm scared, or I need help. It isn't a lack of strength, it's the most accurate measure of it. It's easy to put on a mask. It's hard to show up and let yourself be seen, flaws and all. John's journey of dismantling the wall was slow. He had to learn a new language, the language of emotion. He learned to identify what he was actually feeling. It wasn't just angry or fine. It was disappointed, resentful, insecure, lonely. Just naming the feelings took away their terrifying power. As he practiced this in therapy, the constant anxiety began to fade. By allowing himself to feel sadness and fear, he found they weren't catastrophic. They were just feelings. They came, and then they went. He was developing real emotional resilience, the ability to bend without breaking. But the most profound changes happened outside the therapist's office. He took a risk. He sat down with his partner, and for the first time, he just told her his truth. He told her he was scared. He told her he felt lost. He was terrified she would see him as weak. Instead, she moved closer. She took his hand. And for the first time in years, she saw him. The real him. That single act of vulnerability created more intimacy than a decade of stoic performance ever could. He tried it with a close friend. Over a beer, instead of defaulting to sports, he said, "Man, I've been going through a really tough time lately." There was a brief silence. Then his friend put his drink down and said, "Me too." That conversation went on for 2 hours, the most honest one they'd had in 15 years. He was learning that creating space for vulnerability doesn't just heal you, it gives other men permission to heal too. It builds the community that dismantles the very isolation that is so destructive. John wasn't becoming a different person. He was becoming the person he was always meant to be. He was still strong and driven, but now his strength was flexible. It was rooted not in the denial of his humanity, but in the full embrace of it. He was learning that a man's heart isn't a liability to be locked away. It's a compass meant to guide him. The new blueprint, actionable steps for the modern man. John's story is a roadmap. It shows that while the old blueprint for masculinity is broken, we have the power to draw a new one. It's not about an overnight transformation. It's about laying one new brick at a time. So, if you feel stuck behind a wall, here is a practical toolkit to get started. First, start small. You don't need to bare your soul to the world. Pick one person you trust, a partner, a friend, a family member, and share one small thing. Instead of "work was fine," try, "I'm actually pretty stressed about a project." It's about practicing emotional honesty on a small scale. Second, practice self-compassion. As you do this, your inner drill sergeant will show up, telling you you're weak. Your job is to recognize that voice for what it is. Old programming. The antidote is self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend. When that critical voice appears, just tell yourself, "This is hard. It's okay that this feels uncomfortable. I'm learning." Third, find your safe space. Every man needs a place to take off the mask. For many, that's a therapist's office. For others, it's a men's support group. These groups are incredibly effective at reducing social isolation and building community. Studies have shown that peer support groups can be as effective as group cognitive behavioral therapy for improving symptoms of depression. One study even found that participants in men's support groups showed a 35% reduction in depressive symptoms in just 12 weeks. Your safe space could also just be a journal. The medium doesn't matter as much as the function, a place for total honesty. Fourth, redefine strength. This is the most crucial step. Consciously reject the old definition of strength as unemotional toughness. Start celebrating vulnerability as an act of courage in yourself and others. When a friend opens up, don't try to fix it. Just listen. Say, "That sounds really hard." By doing this, you co-create a new culture of masculinity, one where true strength is defined by emotional courage, authenticity, and connection. This is not about becoming softer or less of a man. It's about becoming a more complete, resilient, and powerful human being. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you were taught to exile. The manly habit of emotional suppression is the ghost in the machine. It's the silent force that convinces us our pain is a private shame and our struggles must be shouldered alone. For generations, it has been a legacy of isolation, passed down from men who were doing the best they could with the tools they had. But we have better tools now. We have the knowledge, the language, and the courage to write a new story. John's journey from a breaking point to a breakthrough shows us the way. The path forward is not through building higher walls. It's through the terrifying, liberating act of letting them come down. True strength is not the absence of feeling. It is the courage to feel it all. True power is not controlling everything around you. It's being honest about the world inside you. Your emotions are not a liability. They are your guide. Your vulnerability is not a weakness. It is your greatest strength. The choice is ours. We can continue to live by the old silent code that is quietly killing us. Or we can choose to speak, to connect, and to live with the full force of our whole authentic selves. If you are ready to stop performing and start living, comment below with, "I am ready to build." You are not alone in this. Let's build a new definition of strength together.